Hi, and welcome to the My Psych Space podcast. This podcast is about mental health for children and youth. More specifically, we'll be looking at some of the ways emotion can affect the mental health of young people. Adults, you may want to reflect on what we cover here for yourself as well. Much of the content can also apply to you. We all develop through our entire lifespan in big and small ways, and mental health is not something you solve once and done. Instead, it's something we must continually rebalance and adjust throughout our entire lifetime. So while this podcast is targeting the younger set, adults, pay attention. Your skills in this area are a very important piece of the mental well-being puzzle for the children around you. Let's jump right into the science now by looking at how we support children and adolescents. Studies by researchers such as Blattner, Coe, and Matisse have found that the adolescent perspective really matters. What an adolescent perceives shapes the reality they actually see. To better understand the ways that emotions affect mental health, it's really important that we hear their perspective on the process. To help us with this, today we're fortunate enough to welcome my daughter, Francesca D'Amico, to join us in the conversation. Each adolescent is unique, but Francesca is 19 and can still relate to the adolescent perspective, and her childhood is a lot closer than mine. So welcome, Francesca.
Hi, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here. So we're going to jump right in by looking at mental health challenges. We're often hearing about the mental health challenges of our children and adolescents, both before and after COVID-19. In their May 2022 article, the American Academy of Pediatrics stated these mental health challenges are at an epidemic rate, with 20% of children in the United States having identified a mental health condition. And it's worse for minority children and those living in poverty, as they face increased stressors and have less access to mental health care. Additionally, the World Health Organization has found that 1 in 7 10 to 19-year-olds in the world today experiences a mental disorder. That's something such as a behavioral disorder, depression, anxiety, and this age group's leading cause of illness and disability tend to be those items that I just listed off. What do you think about this, Francesca?
I've seen a lot of this in myself and my peers as well. And I think you mentioned that stressors, low income have more stressors, so there's more likely to be more mental health. And I think that's very true, especially because me, as myself, I definitely don't have as many stressors as someone who is living in poverty or in a minority group. But the stresses that I do have are definitely the contribution to my my mental health, or the negative aspect of my mental health. So I can very much agree with that.
What would you say your biggest stressors are right now?
Definitely school. School is very stressful. Even though I like it, it's a lot of work, and just deadlines and things, and tests majorly. I think also just self-development can stress me out sometimes too.
Yeah.
Just having emotions and being why do I feel this way? Do I want to feel this way? Blah, blah, blah. Just kind of evaluating all the emotions. And then sometimes there's times when I don't understand something, and that can also really, or I don't feel like I have control over something, and that can really affect my mental health.
Yeah, and the way you feel stressed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Was it different when you were back in high school? Because you're in college now. How was it for you in high school? Can you remember that?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's because in college you're not with your family or or because you are just, your brain is developing so much more at that age. But in high school, I feel like I honestly didn't feel like I had to deal with mental health until this past summer. A little bit in my first year of college, just because, it was a big transition and everything. But I felt like it was more on the surface, more academic related. And then this summer was really hard for me, I think, because I was pretty isolated. I was up in LA, so I wasn't with my family, and I didn't have many friends up there. And I think that was when I really was okay, I understand what mental health and what mental illness can mean to people. But I think in high school, I didn't, I would always be yeah, mental health, let's go, but I think because I had such a great support system, I never really knew what it felt like to have difficulties with my mental health, which I'm really grateful for. But I think it's also just having the support and like the support from family, friends, and obviously school wasn't as hard in high school, that it's just a lot easier to have a better mental health.
Yeah. Wow.
So.
Interesting. Cool. Thank you. That's great to kind of see what you noticed. So if you or someone you know is facing mental and emotional distress and you want some support, call the National Mental Health Hotline, which is 988. This is a hotline for people in emotional distress or who are struggling with suicidal thoughts. There is help there when you need it for your more significant mental health issues. We're going to switch over and really look at mental wellness for the bulk of this podcast. So we really want to set up the tone for the struggles that people are having with mental health issues, but know that there's things we can proactively do to build a solid base so that when you face those stressors that Francesca was talking about, you've got some depth to handle them. And we're going to look at some of the preventative things that we can start doing to really increase our mental wellness, if we think about it from that perspective. So I want you to take just for a minute and kind of give you a metaphor that helps you see how important this can be. And think about your mental health as you would your body's need for food. You get hungry every day, your stomach growls, you notice your body and you notice what you're feeling inside. You respond and get yourself something to eat. Super, super common, super normal. We all do it. We can think of your mental health in a similar way. We have a feeling inside our body that lets us know what we're doing is working or not working for our mental health. If we're lonely, we might feel a need to connect with other people. If we're stressed, we might feel that we want to reduce the stress. And if we feel an emotion that kind of pushes inside of us, we feel some way to respond to that emotion. Did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think this might not be the direction you're going, but something that sparked my thought was it's obviously if you're hungry, you're going to eat food. That totally makes sense. But I feel like in our society and like world today, if you are having like difficult mental health issues, it's not second nature to be like, oh, let me take care of myself. And I think that's how like if you feel stressed about something, usually the first answer is like, oh, what can I do to like still be successful in my stress? It's not like, oh, what can I do to calm down from this stress and like back away from it? And I think that is probably one of the biggest, in my opinion, I don't have any research to back it, but in my opinion, one of the what I've noticed is that like can be one of the biggest leading factors to mental illness is because when you're hungry, eating food is like an obvious choice. But when you have mental health issues, I don't think it's normalized to seek help or seek a wellness option like you're talking about. So,
well, that's exactly what I was trying to say.
Perfect.
That is perfect. And I actually want to just jump to that. Our goal here is that you'll start to see this as normal, taking care of your mental health, being as normal as eating when you're hungry. So that's part of what my goal is, to really provide tools so that it becomes as obvious to take care of your mental health as it does to take care of your stomach when it's hungry. So we look at the world of Instagram and our news feeds, and none of those really paint a very good normal for us. So what I want to do is provide a resource that really helps us get cued into what normal could and should be or might be for you, let you explore your own personal normal, and also look at the research. This whole podcast is research-based. So it's tied directly to the research that scientists are currently doing on this specific area. So I think that we can really rely on that research as a way to a beginning place, and then obviously customize it because we're all individuals and everyone is unique. So just because we talk about something in one direction here, you might do it slightly differently for yourself. Just like some people prefer to eat apples and others prefer to eat tomatoes. It's kind of a similar thing. So that's exactly it. Perfect. Good. All right, well, we're going to just talk about one segment of mental health and mental well-being because there are so many pieces that go into building mental well-being. Researchers Waltz and Chow describe the components of mental health as a complex system of cognitive, behavioral, and emotional forces. And other researchers, including McDuffie, Phelan, and Strawman, have found that genetics, chemicals released within the body, the places we spend time, and the people we are with can also affect our mental health. Today, we're going to focus just on the one aspect of mental health, that is emotions. We're going to look at emotions and how they can magnify our daily stressors, how we can increase or decrease our mental health in terms of the way we express our emotions. And researchers have actually found 3 key skills that are actually pretty darn easy to develop that children, youth, and even adults can practice to increase their mental wellness. So we'll dig in to those 3 things here today. And the first one is called emotion differentiation. That is a big academic term. And it basically, the researcher Nook has given us a really great definition of this that's very accessible. And that is, it's basically a child, adolescent, or adult's ability to identify their own emotions. It's a pretty simple concept, but it really has a lot of power. Yeah, what do you think about that emotional differentiation?
I think that on the surface, it sounds like, oh yeah, I'm feeling happy, so I'm happy.
Yeah.
But I think I've noticed recently, especially, that it's really hard to actually do that. And I think you're probably going to get into this, but especially when you're feeling multiple emotions, I think maybe like, there's so many, it's like hard to identify. And then you're like, well, am I really mad? Or maybe I'm just like stressed, or maybe I'm sad, especially when there's all of that. So I think that, it's definitely helpful when you're able to be like, I'm mad, now let's move on and see what we can do from that feeling. But I think what I've noticed is hard is I'll feel conflicting or just multiple emotions, and it's kind of hard to know what to do when there's so many different ones coming in your head. So,
it's exactly right. It's exactly right. And I think 2 things, like when you're tired or if you're hungry, if you're sick, all those things can also really kind of exacerbate an emotion that's in there.
Yeah, I've noticed when I'm tired, everything is like times 1,000. And I'm like, oh, it's so horrible. I can't. And then I wake up and I'm like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And what does Dad say to you all the time?
Just to get some sleep and deal with it tomorrow.
Yeah, that's Dad's great advice. But it does work often, not all the time, but it does work a lot, doesn't it? Yep. That being tired really makes your emotions magnify. So, well, turning to young children, and you'll have to see if you can remember any of this when you were little, you can see how important it is to help them understand what they're feeling. They're still getting to know what sad is and what angry is or what excited is. They feel a really big emotion, but they really have no idea what to do with it. They'll burst out crying, or they'll hit, or they'll do some inappropriate, what we might consider inappropriate things in the adult world. And we want to know how to help those children. And what we can do as adults around those children is ask them, how are they feeling? Or name it. Wow, you look really sad. Or you look so excited right now. This is so much fun. But by naming those young children's emotions, we can really aid them in better understanding some of what they're feeling. Because for them, if you're 2, 3, 4, some of these emotions are really new to you as you're kind of getting words and meanings to the things you're feeling inside. Another piece around small children, and I don't know if you've heard this, I've heard it a lot of times at work because I work with small children a lot, is if a child's really upset, the adult in charge of them will say, oh, don't cry, you're fine, or, oh, you're not that mad, it's okay. And that actually isn't that helpful for children trying to learn what their emotions mean, because they're going to look to you for cues. And when they're feeling this huge amount of sadness or huge amount of anger inside, and you're telling them that it's actually okay, that they really don't feel that, it can get really confusing. Yeah. What do you want to say about that one?
I've definitely seen that happen. And like, I can see where they're coming from, but I also think it starts the pattern of suppressing your emotions, which as most people know, that just leads to so many more problems. Because I think if you are like, you're a little kid, you're like, oh, I fell and scraped my knee, and they're like, no, you're fine, it's okay, you'll be fine, and it's like, I mean, they're probably not young enough to have these thoughts, but they'd probably be like, oh, well, I thought I was really sad, but they're telling me I'm fine, so I guess I'm not sad. When their brain is probably really I don't know, maybe releasing chemical or having an emotion that's actually sad. And I think that I I think that is just like a bad pattern. I agree. That's just a bad pattern to go with. And
you can see why we get confused, right? Because I think all of us grew up with adults. It's what we do as adults. I mean, adults actually, to their credit, they're not trying to like confuse the child.
Yeah.
They're just trying to like calm the situation down. They want to make
no one wants a screaming kid all around.
They want to like make it okay, right?
Yeah.
So the adult is trying to be really helpful. But in the process, the kiddo can get kind of confused. So the best thing to do if you're an adult in that situation with a small young child who's still figuring out their feelings, or really even an adult, if you have an adult freaking out to say, oh, you're fine, doesn't work very well with an adult either. But to really acknowledge, hey, I can tell you're really upset. You're really sad. So you spend a second. It doesn't have to be more than 10 seconds that you spend being present to that emotion. Then you can move into, let's see what we can do to address what you need, or let's help you, or I see you're really sad. Let me figure out what you need to feel better. So you can kind of then move them to something that's going to find some peace. But sometimes it's scary to step into that big emotion with the other person. And I just really encourage you, if you have small children in your life or you have adolescents in your life, take that pause, take that 10 or 20-second pause to just be present to that big emotion. What have you seen with that, Francesca?
I've actually noticed this in myself recently a little bit, mainly with the emotion of like disappointment or frustration. A lot of times I'll like, something will happen and I'll be like a little disappointed about it. And then I'll be like, oh, it's fine, like whatever. I was actually talking to my therapist about this, and she was like, you should let yourself feel disappointed, like in good reason, but you should let yourself feel the disappointment as opposed, not that I'm suppressing it. Like I definitely know I'm disappointed, but I think in a way I kind of just brush it off when I could have, or maybe should have more like felt it and like just really been like, man, like I was really disappointed about that. Like that sucks. Instead of just been like, oh, that sucks, but whatever. Like giving myself an excuse to not feel disappointed, as opposed to just being like, yeah, that is disappointing.
Yeah.
That sucks.
And if you give yourself even like 10 minutes to really feel the disappointment, then you can let it go and move along, right? It doesn't have to be a long amount of time. Maybe it's even an hour or two, but it's enough time to give it some attention before you go to the next place, right? And that's really great. I love that advice. Yeah, that's perfect. Cool. So moving to older children, Francesca kind of alluded to this already, but they are learning to identify multiple emotions at once, where young children will be like, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm excited. They usually have a kind of a single driving emotion. And researchers have found that, specifically a researcher named Nook and his team have noticed that the ability to differentiate in adolescence drops. And the hypothesis Nook and the team have come up with is that older children are trying to learn to name multiple feelings going on at once. So instead of just feeling happy, they might be feeling happy, nervous, worried, excited, and frustrated, kind of all rolled into one, based on what they're, maybe they're about to take a huge exam or give some kind of huge talk to their class. And the amount of feelings they feel wrapped around that experience are very diverse. And that just adds to the difficulty in being able to name those emotions, because there are so many all going on at once. So I think if you're working with or living with adolescents, to really realize that this is a new skill, to be able to juggle multiple emotions at once, and to maybe name that for them and help them realize, wow, you're doing emotions at a higher level now that you're older. And that is, a lot more challenging. So to help them realize that as well, because it can sometimes feel like, why can't I just handle this? Why am I struggling with this? But when you help them see, it's because you're now dealing with a complex set of emotions, not just the simple ones you had when you were 7 and 8. That can kind of give them a frame like, oh, okay, this is normal. It's normal to feel this kind of confusion around this when I'm in this stage of my life. What do you think, Francesca?
I did already kind of mention it a little bit. I think also, at least for me, the fact that knowing something that I feel or that I have it's like, why is it so hard for me to deal with this? Knowing that is normal just brings so much ease, and honestly will help the situation so much better. And I just think that's really interesting and I think that's why I think it's really necessary to tell people this and educate people on their own emotional like
development
stuff. Because just because at least for me, like when I feel something that feels like kind of off, or like maybe not like a normal feeling or a normal like, or I just like don't understand why I can't like figure something out, having someone telling me like, oh, like I felt the same way, or like that's normal to feel, that will calm me down so much more and like help my mental health mostly. So
because we can worry on top of all those other emotions.
Exactly.
We get to add worry.
Because then I can start getting anxious. I'm like, am I not supposed to be feeling this way? Why can't I do this?
Yeah, exactly. So if we can say, hey, this is normal, and then helping them to be able to pick out what are the key emotions that are mixed in this little soup of emotion, and then you can kind of address each one, and you can be really supportive. Yeah, that's amazing. That's great. So another piece, Nook and the research team have also found that there's a pretty small relationship, but still a relationship between adolescents' ability to identify their negative emotions and positive mental health. This same relationship has been found to be pretty strong later in life for adults. So with adolescents, it's still kind of in a very weak relationship. Once you are an adult, they've found that relationship is really quite strong. So for adults to be able to name the negative emotions like sadness, anger, frustration, worry, stress, anxiety, those kinds of things, be able to talk about those things, there's a relationship between people who can do that and people who have good, solid mental health. So it really says a lot about our culture really shies away from talking about those things. But the more you can identify, talk about, and be present to those things, where the research has found that it actually really helps with mental health. So the more you as an adult can help the adolescents in your life to talk about the negative feelings they may be having, you can be an outlet for that or model that for them, which means, practice it yourself so they can watch you doing it, or just ask them, how are you feeling? And then be okay when they say, hey, not so good, or kind of whatever. You can say, hey, give me the real scoop, how you're really doing, not just the happy-go-lucky, yeah, I'm good, but what's really going on inside of you. That if you can be that kind of a friend to an adolescent, that's amazing, because then they've really got a place to speak about what's going on. Anything you want to add on that one?
Yeah, well, I think that just ties into the if you are like shying away from talking about emotions or, something negative that you're feeling, you don't want to talk about it. I think it probably just adds another layer of emotion of like shame or like, oh, like something's wrong with me. Like I'm worried. I feel embarrassed about it. Like I feel like no one else feels this way. Like I shouldn't talk about this. This is so like bad. I think that probably just like magnifies it and makes sense that would lead to not as much of a positive mental health as of someone who would be like, hey, like I'm really not happy right now. Like, and then you can talk to them, people like, what do you want to do to fix it? Or like, what can you change? And then they'll help you improve that feeling and you'll feel more open and okay with your emotions. Because I think, at least I've noticed for me, is a lot of times I'll have like an emotion that I don't necessarily like or something. It makes it worse if I don't do anything about it than if I were to talk about it and do something. And then, so you kind of get like a double win if you talk about it and a double lose if you don't.
Yeah.
Is what it kind of seems like.
Yeah, I think you're right on with that one. So the flip side is kind of interesting with positive emotions, being able to name positive emotions. Like I'm happy, I'm excited, I'm feeling upbeat. There is no correlation with improving mental health. So that's kind of intriguing. So people who can talk about how happy they are no more better mental health wise than people who don't talk about how happy they are. That's again what Nook and the team have found. So that's also kind of an interesting piece of the puzzle there. And then one final advantage that Nook and the team have found is that several researchers have done studies and found the ability to identify emotions can protect youth from the negative impacts of stress. But that's slightly different than mental health, but stress does carry its own, you can have great mental health and mental well-being and still feel the rigors of stress. And they find that the ability to identify emotions can really help reduce some of the negative draw of stress. So that's something kind of interesting too, little side finding there. So when it comes to ways you can take action to improve emotion differentiation for the children in your life, Research by Starr and others highlights the basic importance of having a good relationship with the child or adolescent. So that really all of this works best if you've got that solid relationship. This means you manage your own emotions when you're around them, you respect them and include their input in decisions, and you build a good connection with them. So you have a relationship with a comfortable bond between the two of you. You know, that bond, that kind of ability to really talk openly will make such a big difference in these conversations. Given all these research findings, it's clear that emotion differentiation allows us to take some positive small steps towards building mental wellness for our children and youth by helping them to learn to name what they're feeling. We can help them do this by, again, like I said, modeling our own process of naming our emotions, talking with them about the emotions they feel, and reflecting together on the emotions around us. You know, the world is a classroom. So you might be out at the mall and see some crazy, behavior from some other children and be able to talk about it. And that's a learning opportunity for your small child or your adolescent. We want our children and youth to know it's okay to feel a full range of emotions, because feeling all these different emotions is really a normal part of being human. It goes back to that piece we were talking about earlier. Like, it's normal. It's normal to feel mad. It's normal to feel sad. It's okay. Mm-hmm. Anything more you want to say on this one?
No, I think that's
okay. Cool. Yeah, we definitely gave you a lot with that. Yeah. So now we're going to move to the second key finding that researchers have uncovered to help with emotional wellness or mental wellness through emotion. And that is a thing called emotion regulation. And emotion regulation is, the researcher Helen, describes this skill as the process of managing the intensity and length of time a person expresses their emotion. So it's the work you do to actually kind of control, manage, mediate the way you express your emotion in the world outside of yourself, as well as how you do it inside of yourself. And the researcher Gross talks about the ways people can influence emotions they have and the ways they express them out in the world and experience them inside, kind of like I just described, inside their own body. So we can learn to do this in ways that increases our mental wellness, as well as ways that decrease our mental wellness. So the way we regulate our emotions can either make us feel better, or we can do it in a way that makes us feel worse. I want to give you an example of emotional regulation that we can work with. So you can imagine a person who gets mad, talks about how mad they are for a few minutes, remains generally in control throughout all of it, and then over an hour or two, lets go of it. That's an example of emotion regulation done well. Then an example of emotion dysregulation, so not doing a regulation well, would be the opposite. It would be a person who got mad, would do something like throw chairs around the room for a little bit, then yells for a long period of time about how mad they are, and then might grumble about it and ruminate on it for days or weeks to come. Now, these are clearly the opposite ends of the spectrum, and there's steps everywhere along this spectrum. But you can see the big differences between those who regulate their emotions and those who do not. Small children have almost no emotion regulation when they throw a tantrum at the shops, throwing themselves on the floor and screaming or pitching something across the room. Have you seen something like this before, Francesca?
Yeah.
What do you want to tell me about that one?
Well, I can tell you about something. I also wanted to go back to your previous point.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about this first. Once I was in like Coronado or it was like a nice, like kind of touristy town. And my friend and I were in this candy shop. It was like an old-fashioned candy shop. And this child was like throwing an absolute tantrum because, I don't know, they wanted some other candy or something. And the worst part about it is the parent was like basically being led by the child and like gave in to the kid, which is a whole nother thing. But yeah, the kid was just...
What were they yelling or what?
Yeah, the kid was like, I really want this. Like, I want the candy. Like, blah, blah, blah. And the parent was like, okay, fine. Like, you can have it. Just like, probably just to make the kid stop having a tantrum. But anyway, my friend and I were like, oh my God. Like, that was a lot. But going back to the other point, something kind of like to the previous first point you talked about. I think what's really hard about emotional regulation is finding the balance between feeling the emotion and knowing when to let it go. Because I think a lot of times you can be like it goes back to like my disappointment thing, where it's like, how long is my disappointment gonna like be beneficial? And then at what point do I need to let it go is kind of hard. And it's like, you don't want to let it go too early and discredit the emotion. So I think that emotional regulation is hard. I think it's a really hard thing to do. And I think, so that's just one thing.
A lot of this is actually pretty hard. That's why we struggle, right? If it was easy, we would have such great mental health. But it sounds easy when we say it, right? But you're right, it is hard. It's hard to know, like, where's the right line? Should I let myself cry for 20 minutes in my pillow? Or should I, sometimes you just have to run to the bathroom because you feel like you're going to cry and you don't want to cry in class or whatever.
Or I do just cry in class.
Or you just cry in class, right? So it's like, how do you handle this? Because it comes bursting out sometimes. And what are you going to do about it? So no, it isn't easy. That is for sure.
Yeah.
We'll get back to the tantrum stuff, and we're going to come back to some of the points you just made in a minute here. But according to researchers Sanchez, small children begin to learn the skill of emotion regulation by relying on the resources outside of themselves. They don't have the ability inside to deal with this. They just haven't built those skills yet. So they rely on their parents, maybe a favorite blankie, a nookie. Those are all external things that little children can use to give themselves some regulation because they don't have the abilities to do it for themselves. So that parent giving in, I'm sure, did regulate that child a little bit. Might not have been the best move long term because now they're going to get tantrums constantly. But a parent could also try to soothe the child without giving in. There are definitely ways to do that too. Yeah. What do you notice about that?
Well, you probably remember this. When I was young, I had this one jacket that I had to wear. It was the pink butterfly jacket.
Yeah, I remember it.
And I remember, you remember this too. I told you, you're like, why do you want the jacket? And I was like, oh, it makes me feel safe. So I don't know. Thinking about that now, maybe that was because it helped me regulate my emotions. I would be like, oh, I miss my parents, miss my family. And I'd be like, well, I have my jacket. And or I would also have these little stuffed animals that you would kiss every day. And I would have it in my backpack.
Yeah, exactly.
Every time I was sad or missed my parents or family, I would have my stuffed animal. So yeah, I guess that was a form of emotional regulation. That's so interesting.
Yeah, it is, really, isn't it?
I always wondered, I was like, I don't know why I would want that jacket. Yeah. I actually was talking to my friend the other day, and she was like, oh yeah, when I was young, I went to a school with uniforms, and she had the same thing with a jacket, where she had to wear that jacket because it made her feel safe. It made her feel, probably helped her regulate her emotions. But they wouldn't let her wear it because of the uniform. Yeah, and she said it was really, really hard for her. Wow. So it was really interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Yeah. Because I remember you wore that jacket every day for probably a year.
And I understand how she would yell and cry and be like, I can't not wear this jacket. And I feel like if someone told me you can't wear that jacket, I'd probably react the same way. Yeah. Just because it's too scary to not have the jacket. So.
Yeah. So these little things really matter a lot. It's great to, kind of hearing that perspective from you and your friend.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, they really do make a difference, and they help young people kind of find that safe space or that place of regulation. That's awesome. So given this insight into the research that you can see that the small children in your life, they really need your help. They need you to show up as a calm force and to stay calm because they're taking your lead. So if your child's having a tantrum or having a huge emotional response, and you also have a huge emotional response, you're just feeding the emotion within the space. So the more the adult can stay calm, you can really be that calm force for the child. And then it sounds like the more you can really support some of their need for that jacket, that stuffed animal. I promise you, Francesca no longer wears the butterfly jacket. And she does not keep stuffed animals in her pocket anymore. So it doesn't last forever. You don't need to worry if you have a small child wearing the same jacket every day. It's okay. That won't last forever.
I think I do still have the jacket somewhere, though. For my child, when they need emotion regulation.
There you go. I love it. Perfect. In addition, you can model emotion regulation for your children. So they're watching you all the time, and they're going to see what you do. So when you lose your stuff over something, they're going to say, oh, that's what you do when you get upset, or that's what you do when you're sad. So you want to help them see how to do that well. Yeah, you can get mad, but you want to do it appropriately in a way that you would want your children to also respond when they're mad. Same with, some sad or frustrated or anxious. You're going to want to talking with your child about, I'm feeling really anxious right now, so this is what I'm doing to address my feelings of anxiousness. just explaining that to your child can be so helpful for them, because now they have some roadmap or some ideas about what to do when they feel anxious themselves. So the more you can do that, the better. Emotional regulation is complex. And as a researcher, Adrienne and others point out, it is impressive that children are able to manage the complexity of the emotion regulation, because it involves physical feelings, facial expressions, choices of behavior, motivations, their wants for themselves, their wants for others, and their thoughts and feelings around the issue. So all those factors are coming into play. So just have some sensitivity when you're for those children in your life, knowing there's a lot of pieces they have to bring together to learn how to regulate their emotions. It takes time to get mastery over all those aspects of their life. So knowing that for your children and your adolescents, we sometimes think adolescents should have it all together. We sometimes need to give them a little more room to not have it all together. It's just a lot. So I think realizing how many pieces they're controlling there can be helpful. Over time, as children grow up, Sanchez have found they build the skills to regulate their emotions. Children get better at calming themselves down and begin using internal skills to do this. And these are skills such as problem solving, or learning to accept things that they don't like, and learning to let go. You can help children learn these skills by having supportive problem-solving conversations with them when they hit an emotional roadblock, or by helping them learn about accepting things they cannot change, and the lifelong learning of letting go when necessary, which I know personally I am still working on every day. It's a tough one. You can also help children in your life by practicing these skills for yourself. Again, because modeling really makes a difference with those children around you. When they see the way you behave when you're facing a letting go situation or a anxiety-producing situation, it teaches them what to do themselves. Wouldn't it be nice if children grew up and built these internal skills for themselves and they were set for life? But of course, that is not what happens. And we humans need to make everything a bit more tricky. We can build internal skills to help us calm down and support our mental wellness. Those are called adaptive skills. So when they actually are helping us, they're adaptive. But we can also build internal skills that lead to more mental challenges, and these are called maladaptive. Maladaptive skills are increased levels of rumination, which is thinking continually about an issue you have emotions around, so it kind of fills your head all the time in an unhelpful way. We can also do something called catastrophizing, which is blowing things up to making it so terrible, making something small so big and terrible that you think you'll never be able to get over it. We can also do a lot of self-blame and blaming of others. And all of those are part of the building that internal skill set in a maladaptive way. What do you think about all that, Francesca?
Yeah, well, I think that thinking about it as like kind of like a toolbox is like a really good, that's actually how I think about it also. Where like, I kind of developed that over like that past summer when mental health was really a big thing for me. I like started to like meditate. I started to journal. I started to prioritize my sleep because I noticed that when I did not get enough sleep, everything was worse. I started to eat food that I really felt good eating, made me feel healthy, made me feel nourished. But I know I definitely also had those like negative tools in the toolbox as well. I would overthink, like the rumination you're talking about, definitely catastrophizing. My mom knows. I would call her all the time, catastrophizing. So I think it's hard because like everyone has a toolbox, but I think it's interesting to think of it as a way that as there's positive tools and there's also negative tools. And you can choose to take out the positive tool or take out the negative tool.
Yeah.
And I think, so it's definitely, I never thought about it as having negative tools.
Yeah, exactly, right? And it's easy to indulge catastrophizing, right? Or indulge rumination. Like, we have to actually have some discipline to say, I am not going to think about this anymore. I am not going to beat myself up about this anymore. You have to kind of draw a line in the sand sometimes. And it takes real discipline to do.
Yeah, no, it's like the toolbox, you open it and on the first level, it's the negative tools. And then you have to lift that up to get to the good
Yeah,
tools. You know,
right.
you got to get past the negative tools to get to the good tools. So
I love it. That's awesome.
Take some strength.
I love it. Yeah. So researchers such as Zimmerman and Iwanski have found that adolescents tend to see a fall in their adaptive internal skills for emotion regulation and an increase in the maladaptive skills for emotion regulation. Many of the mental health issues that are common to adolescents, such as eating disorders, risky behaviors, and substance abuse, are connected to adolescents' ability to regulate or calm themselves when they feel big emotions. So if you've got more of those, maladaptive tools in your toolbox, they may take over. And remember, adolescence is the time when they may be putting together this complexity of multiple emotions. So it may be that it's harder to regulate all these emotions when there's so many extra emotions in there, right? So again, having a little extra sympathy for your adolescent because they're really trying to get this down and it's challenging. Researchers such as Helland recommend 5 places to focus to build emotion regulation for children and adolescents. So these are specific things you can do with the children you care for to help them out. And adults, you can probably do some of these things for yourself too to build your emotional regulation as well. The first thing is work to build acceptance around the issue that is causing the big emotions. That is letting go and learning to live with the parts of life that are not within a range that can be controlled or changed. Do you think does that?
Yeah, well, I think that actually kind of sparks something where like knowing when to let go, I think a good marker is if it's out of your control, you should let it go. If it's in your control, maybe don't let it go quite so fast. But if it's out of your control, there's no reason to like dwell on it. Like taking a test. You took the test, it didn't go very well. That sucks, but it's over. So maybe next time do better, like study more, So I think that that's
knowing what's in your control and what's out. And that sometimes is hard to know. Sometimes it's obvious, like the test is a great example. Sometimes it's harder to know that too.
Mm-hmm.
But that is great advice. I think you're right on with that. The next thing you can do is learn from the big emotion through reflecting on them and trying to understand them. So when you have those big emotions, taking some time to, like Francesca said, journaling. It's a great way to learn about them. Have you done other things that have helped you learn about your big emotions?
Well, I mean, I like talking about it. I've talked with like you, friends, therapists, I think talking about it really helps because you're like, well, I did this and like this happened. I reacted this way. And it made me feel this way, and I don't know what that means, or maybe I think this means this, I've actually noticed that when I talk about things, I like see it from a different perspective and be like, oh, maybe that's why, or, So I think, and journaling definitely, I think I'm kind of excited to go back. At the end of the year, I want to go back through my journal and kind of just like read through it and see like the like progress or just like different ways I was thinking like months ago, and just kind of see how it's different now and so on, just to kind of like doubly reflect on like everything. So
because lots is changing still.
You can be like, oh, that's so interesting. I felt that way then. I would never feel that now. Like, or so
at your age, still a lot is developing, which is pretty cool.
I think journaling is pretty powerful.
And for us adults, a lot develops too. Life changes fast, so there's a lot going on. So a third way is problem solve around the issue that's causing the big emotion to work at finding a solution or compromise that can meet the need. So again, those problem-solving skills to brainstorm ideas, walk through steps you can take to actually address the issue and make some changes. And then fourth, try distraction, which can change the focus for younger children. And like Francesca said, can also provide a new perspective for adults. So she talked about new perspectives by talking to other people. Maybe you also go put yourself in a brand new environment. Maybe you go volunteer at an elder community, and just that perspective can help shift something for you around a big emotion. So perspective can be a big one.
Well, like today we went to the beach, and yesterday I was feeling kind of stressed or whatever. And after going to the beach, even though I was like, oh, I don't have time for this, like, but I really want to go, after going, I was like, okay, like it's doable, like it was really nice. So
Yeah.
definitely the different environment.
Yeah, it really helps
really
to shift
helpful.
that distraction
Or like
away.
exercise too.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'll work out, I'll like work through something and be like, oh my God. And then at the end, I'm like, okay, like I know how to deal with this now.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, those are great examples.
Yeah.
And then the fifth one is set goals around emotional responses to help build more calm and regulated responses when you find those big emotions are kind of taking over. So if you were someone who found that your sadness really trapped you or your anger really had you acting in ways you didn't want to, you'd actually set some goals. Like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to, make these choices. And I can find myself, I do that sometimes. I'm a really sensitive person. So, and I can like feel like, oh no, maybe something's wrong. And I've told myself, it wasn't officially a goal, but it really could have been a goal. I just said, don't respond to that initial hit of sensitivity. You know yourself well enough to know you're sensitive. So live with it for a while and see how it goes a day from now, and see what you've learned and step back before you actually have that act on that sensitive response. So that's kind of a goal that I set for myself and works really well for me. So have you ever set a goal around your emotions?
I think I definitely have. I have goals to like kind of a bit of the opposite is like not to like burst out when like something doesn't happen correctly or something, or like when I get mad, maybe it's not to like yell right away, to first be like, wait, do I actually need to be mad, or like what's going on? So I think, but I've never actually like been like, this is a goal I'm going to work on. Yeah. It was more just like something happened, then I was like, I don't like how that went.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll try differently next time.
Yeah.
But it's hard to remember like the next time when you get mad in the moment. It's hard to be like, take a second. You more want to just be like, oh my God, I'm so mad.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's kind of like a guideline, right?
Yeah,
but when
I've never
you think
thought about that.
Yeah, when you think about making this like, hey, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to make a different choice. You can see it as a goal, but it's also kind of gives you some buffers, some guardrails. I have an instructor who'll talk about having guardrails on either side of the bowling alley, so you don't go beyond the edges of the guardrails. Mm-hmm. So it kind of gives you some guardrails to keep your emotions in a place that you're comfortable with.
It's a good tool.
It's
another tool in my toolbox.
Another really cool part of emotion regulation is that these skills held by one person can reach beyond that person to benefit those around them. Research by Yanovich and others have found that children with supportive family relationships and good skills at managing their own emotions were better at taking actions to help others in the world outside of themselves. Academics call this pro-social behavior. And many people study pro-social behavior because it's how we increase our inclinations to be helpful, care for others, build empathy, things like that. So it's a really important thing that academics want to increase is pro-social behavior. But knowing that that supported youth and adolescents who can regulate their emotions tend to also be higher in that care for others is pretty cool. Another way that emotion regulation can help others is beyond the self is that the adults that build their skills in emotion regulation are able to improve the lives of the children in their care. They can do this because they're able to model that behavior. They're able to create a calmer living environment or school environment because by regulating their emotions, there's not, wild swings of emotion in the environments that those children spend their time in. And they're also able to talk about it with children. So that ability to have a conversation is also super helpful. So as Morris tells us from her research findings, parents are one of the more influential forces of development in children learning to regulate their emotions. So it's a really important aspect of mental health for adults to be able to balance our lives because we are the ones modeling that. What do you think about all that?
More like adolescent wise, I think that also, I think you kind of touched on this, but maybe not completely. I think that like myself, I've noticed this in myself. Like I feel like I've really focused on my emotions a lot in the past year and especially emotional like regulation. And I think that because of that, I'm also able to kind of notice like, I don't know, I feel like emotions and the way we express them like kind of can be like a pattern and like consistent with other people as well. Like if someone like crying, for example, it's like if you're sad, you'll probably cry. If someone else is sad, they'll probably cry, But I think with like more complicated emotions, I've noticed that like I would do something that like because I was feeling embarrassed or awkward or something. And then I would also be like hanging out with someone else at a later time, and they would do something similar to what I would have done when I was embarrassed or awkward. And I get some empathy, like, oh, like, you know, like it's okay. Like they're just feeling a little embarrassed. They're feeling a little awkward. Like, and you can just be more like caring and like helpful to that person instead of being like, why are you acting that way? Like, that's so weird. Like adding to their embarrassment. Instead, just don't even say anything. Just like give them space and be like, okay, they're feeling a little embarrassed right now. And maybe they're not, but I think it just helps to be a little more, being aware of my emotions has made me a lot more aware and empathetic of how other people are probably feeling. And I think that's helpful.
Yeah, it's super helpful. That's really cool.
Yeah,
that's great. So we're going to look at one final skill, third skill that researchers have found really helps with mental wellness. And that is called emotional recovery. And this is the time it takes for the emotions from a problem in one area of life to stop influencing the emotions you're carrying around with you as you go to your other experiences in the day. So I'm going to give you an example, and you might have one from your real life too. Mm-hmm. But there's a study by a researcher named Bali and a team, and they tested elementary students' emotion recovery from a stressful event at school. They found that the students who had recovered emotionally from that stressful event at school by the time they went to bed were the exact same students that teachers had identified as having good mental wellness and fewer issues with mental challenges such as anxiety, depression, aggression, or acting out behaviorally. These students were the ones who were able to let go of that negative experience and be more solid with their emotions by the end of the day. Have you found anything about in your life in that way?
Yeah, I think I have. Yeah, I think so, because I think like a lot of times, like school's an easy example, like feeling like stressed for an assignment or a test. I think that like that's like the stressor, the like what you were talking about. I think sometimes I'll be able to be like, okay, like I'm setting this aside, I'm going to deal with it tomorrow, or like, you know, whatever. I think sometimes if I let it stress me out enough, I won't sleep well because I like didn't deal with it before I went to bed.
Yeah.
So I won't sleep well. Then the next day I'm like more tired. So obviously my mental like regulation isn't as strong as it could be. And, you know, it starts to lead to like anxious feelings and like you said, like a mental illness, you know, like, so yeah, I definitely, it's very true.
Yeah.
I always try, I think it's really important. I always try to like deal with things before I go to bed, or at least like deal with them emotionally, even if I don't finish it, just be like, emotionally, this is done for today. And tomorrow is like the next thing.
Yeah,
but
that's a great practice. Yeah.
It's easier said than done. But it's a goal.
Right, there you go. It's a great goal. I love it. That's great. So the research team, Bali and other researchers also pointed out that this emotional distress spilling over between home and school is actually a double hit for these children because they have the challenge of the emotion that they get to struggle with for a longer period of time. So instead of being stressed out or emotional about the problem for an hour or two, they've got 6 or 7 hours of that negative feeling. They are also missing out on the positive support they could receive from the other people throughout the day because they're so caught up in their negative emotions. So it could be that mom, dad, friends, after school, teachers, whatever it is, could be providing some joy, but the student can't even receive it because they're so clouded by the negativity or the big emotion of that earlier problem. So it really has a double-edged hit for the mental well-being of that youth or child struggling with that. Same is true for adults. You know, if we carry our emotions along with ourselves like that, we're going to also lose on both edges of that sort as well. What do you want to say about that?
Yeah, I think that's really true because I mean, a little bit different, but when I have, like, let's say you have the stressor at like in the morning, there's sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm too stressed to see my friends. But sometimes I'll be like, yeah, I'm stressed. I don't know if I have time to see my friends, but I think it'll make me feel better. I go and I feel better and I feel more capable of dealing with that stressor or of like setting it aside. So I think that being able to let yourself reach out to the help that's there can be a lot more beneficial than not. So
right. So if you can kind of set that anger aside and be with a friend, you can kind of shift.
Or like sometimes I'll like talk to the friend about my anger.
Perfect.
And I'll feel better, you know? So it's like, So I think it can be helpful to, sometimes you have to like force yourself to do it. But in the end, most of the time I've always been like, wow, that was good. I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I didn't just like ruminate in my anger or stress or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's perfect. So research by Chung and others found that the flip side of this is also true. Adolescents who had family conflicts tended to have increased levels of conflict with their peers. So it goes both ways. School conflict affected home, and home conflict affected peers. And you could surmise it could also affect school. But that isn't actually in the research I had here for preparing for this podcast. Both of these are examples of what's called spillover. And spillover is where an emotion in one situation spills into another life situation, which magnifies again the impact of that negative emotion. The sooner children and youth can recover from challenging emotions, the better for their mental wellness. And same for us adults. The more we can kind of let go and reduce that spillover effect, the better for our mental wellness as well. As a result of their research, the team pointed out the need for adults to help children see the linkages between their feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. So based upon my personal experience, I recommend adults also work to understand these linkages because it's not easy to see how your feelings, your thoughts, and your behaviors link up and get you doing things you might want to be doing or might not want to be doing. Reinforce feelings, reinforce thoughts that are useful or maybe not so useful. By focusing attention on improving our emotional recovery, we will first reduce the negative impact of our big emotions on others around us, including the children in our life. And second, we will be increasing our own mental wellness and general parenting or teaching practices. And third, again, we'll be modeling this learning to the children in our care. That modeling, I just can't say enough of how significant that is. These are the exact 3 areas that researchers such as Morris and others have identified as the ways that parents can help influence emotional recovery and regulation in their children. Morris and her research team have found that adolescents are better at emotional recovery when they have warm and caring parents who coach them on how to manage anger and sadness. Teachers, you can also reinforce building skills in this area as a part of your classroom management routine. So there's really lots of ways we can do this for the kids in the world, and they really need it. With some support, the skills of emotional differentiation, regulation, and recovery can work together to help children and adolescents strengthen their mental wellness. Building these 3 skills when responding to emotions is a developmental process, and it takes time. And all the children have their own unique ways and contexts to do this. Have you noticed any contexts, like environments, places you are, where this is easier or harder to do these kinds of things?
I think when I'm at home, it's easier for me to feel my emotions, regulate them, just because I've been lucky enough to have a very supportive home and family. I think when I'm at college, there's so much more going on. There's so much more stress, so much more people to like interact with positively and negatively. And, the emotions just kind of go by the wayside. And I think that something I've been working on just because I've noticed that it's not super beneficial to go about it that way. But yeah, I think that the environment is very much important for it because obviously if you're in a very positive environment, you're going to be like, hey, I'm comfortable talking about my emotions and I have time to deal with them. So that's great. In a more stressful and cutthroat, or not even cutthroat, just more intense and just a lot more going on in that environment, it's definitely a lot harder to take the time. You have to be more initiative. You have to have more initiative with it to be like, today I'm going to journal, or today I'm going to sleep more to take care of myself. And I think it's harder, but so the environment is definitely
it makes a big difference.
important.
And researchers Super and Hawkness named this called the developmental niche, this environmental factor. And it's made up of the child's or youth's physical setting, so the place they are, their social setting, the people and the social setting around them, the cultural customs around raising children, which is really fascinating to think about because they're different in different regions of our country here in the United States, and obviously different countries, the customs of raising children can be very different. And then the beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and behaviors of their caregivers. So when you put all those things together, that really builds the 4 parts of the child's developmental niche, which is where they kind of the space they have to develop within. And they use these 4 parts of the child's developmental niche to help build their skills of emotional differentiation, regulation, and recovery. So when you think about supporting children that you are raising or working with, you can consider these different aspects of their context that we just talked about that build up this developmental niche. Consider those 4 parts of surrounding the child, and you may find there are some opportunities to work with the child on these emotional skill building areas more or less, depending on your relationship and the way you are interacting with that child. Yeah.
I think more. Sorry, I always go back to the adolescent just because.
Yeah, do it. No, it's awesome.
I think that even though it's hard to be in those uncomfortable environments, if you're like stable enough, I think it's also very necessary, because if you're always in your comfortable environment, like that's awesome. I think also like for child development, being in that comfortable environment is very important just to get the like baseline like skills going. But I think once you have those down, you're older, and you want to go out more, I think it's really necessary to be in that uncomfortable environment, because it kind of just adds like the next level of complexity of like, how can I deal with these complex emotions with all these complex things and uncomfortable things going on around me? I describe like being at college not my preferred environment, just because it's just that much harder to deal with all these complex emotions going on. But I think when I'm at home, it's easy. I'm like in my familiar place, everything's easy. Like I don't have to like go to the communal bathrooms and like, eat at a dining hall where it's like not really the food I want to eat that day, So that like those small things that shouldn't seem connected to my emotions really, I've noticed, are like have an effect. But I think that it's almost like a challenge, it's like, okay, I can deal with my emotions in this comfortable setting. Let's see how well I can deal with my emotions in this uncomfortable setting and learn from that. It's like another learning experience.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And you know what? We need to learn through our entire lifetime with these kinds of things. So Francesca's doing it now at college. I'm doing it here as, sending kids off to college. So this is a kind of a continual learning for all people as they go through the different phases of their life. So us adults can also think about our own developmental niche. It may be a little different than it is for children, because obviously like the customs around child raising may be not so relevant. But there are other aspects we might find of our context that seem specifically relevant for us. So that's something you could explore on your own. Again, it's not part of research, but it might be your own kind of interesting place to take a look and do some reflection to see what part of your context is supporting your emotion development in these skill areas, and what part may you want to look at or challenge or question. But bottom line is, you're going to want to think about your own development in these 3 skill sets that we were reviewed here today, because what you do, when you do better, the children in your life will also do better. So your abilities to really increase your skills will make a huge difference for those children in your life. Well, I want to wrap up by just thanking you, Francesca, so much for being here. It was great to have you here. I'm really glad you could spend some time here at my Psych space, and we'd love to have you again another time.
Really fun. Very interesting.
Yeah, super fun to have you. And again, this is a space that's designed for you and the children in your life with the goal of sharing all the cool things that are being developed in psychology, and specifically in positive psychology. My name is Christine D'Amico. I've been working with children for the past 10 years. I also am working on a degree in positive developmental psychology. And my Psych space is a place to share all this fascinating research I've been working with in positive psychology with those of you who can use it the most to create positive development for yourself and your children. The research citations that tie to this episode can be found at OpenMinds, the OpenMinds website, which is OpenMinds.LearnBest.com. We'll have them posted there if you want to get in and get your hands on the actual research that supported this podcast. And then until next time, I just encourage you to notice yourself, notice others, and notice the world around you. Thanks so much for spending some time with us.